1884 marked an interesting time in American politics. The presidential candidates at the time, Andrew Jackson and John Quincy Adams, in a heated, of course, presidential election, were waiting for the results to come in from all over the nation. They actually witnessed, though, a strange occurrence. Despite having won the popular vote, Andrew Jackson actually lost to John Quincy Adams. This strange occurrence has actually happened 3 times in American history. Most recently, and I think this would resonate with most of you here today, that of Al Gore and George W. Bush in 2000. Al Gore, of course, won the popular vote, but yet George Bush became our president. So you may be asking at this point, well, why is that? Why is it, or how is it possible that someone can win the popular vote and not become president? Well, it actually has to do with a little peculiar thing in American politics known as the electoral college. And of course, with this election season this year picking up, and voting on the horizon, I think it's essential that we understand the mechanics of how a presidential election works. And in order to do that, you have to understand what the Electoral College is. So let's go to the year 1787, the year our Constitution was drafted. Amongst the many issues that were discussed, one of them was the presidency. How much power does a president have? How long does he serve? And of course, what we're dealing with here today, how is he elected? There were some issues, though, of course, that was discussed. That being, smaller states wanted equal say to larger states. Another issue, slavery. Southern populations in southern states was primarily that of slaves, and slaves couldn't vote, so they felt as if they would have less power choosing the president. And also communication. Simply the vast distances at that time with the primitive communication and transportation that they had, it would just be impractical to calculate and toll all those votes and accurately bring them to Washington to be calculated. So what was decided and compromised was the Electoral College, as we know today. Essentially, the Electoral College works as such. People in these colonies in today's states will vote for an elector, this man here with the monocle and top hat. He in turn, or they in turn, will go to the Capitol and convene with all the other electors nominated in other colonies at the time, states today. They in turn will cast their ballot for president on behalf of the people back in the states. I also want to bring up one thing too. This is actually in our Constitution, Article 2, Section 1. Each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors, equal to the number of senators and representatives to which the state may be entitled in the Congress. This essentially resolved many of the issues that was brought up during the convention. Essentially, the issue of slavery. Slaves were considered 3/5 of a person, so calculated in the total population of states. The total population of a state determines how many House representatives that particular state has. And therefore, those southern states with larger populations of slaves, they actually had more, let's say, electors just because of the population. Also, the issue of communication was resolved. For instance, of course, the people would then cast their ballot for a person who then convenes with the rest at a set location. So that did resolve the issue of communication and fraud at the time. Today, we essentially have the same system in place, but just with a few differences. As you can see, there's varying numbers on this board, and it's set by, of course, how many senators and House representatives there are. California, for instance, has 2 senators. All states have 2 senators and 53 representatives, therefore making 55 total for that state. The differences, though, are that DC has been granted 3 electoral votes. Another difference is the fact that if a candidate wins a state, they in turn get all the electoral votes in that state. And the last point is that Massachusetts and Nebraska actually follow a slightly different system. They award 2 electors to the winner of the state, but also award electors depending on congressional districts. 2008, for instance, McCain won Nebraska, therefore granting him 2 electors. But Obama did win one of the congressional districts out of 3, so he did get 1 elector out of Nebraska. And the same takes place in Maine with 2 congressional districts. I just want to point out too, though, that the U.S. National Archives of Records and Administration does state that Guam, U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, and American Samoa, although if you're born there and live there, you are considered an American citizen, they actually don't have the ability to vote during an election, simply because they don't have any electors, no senators, no House representatives there. If I, for instance, were to move from Florida to U.S. Virgin Islands, I would not be able to vote. I would lose my right to vote. So I would essentially have to move back to one of the states that has electors. Another issue that, in order to win the election, one must actually get 270, which is actually just one more than half of all the electors available. These electors are, or how they are to fill these positions, are determined by the party. Let's just take Florida for instance. The Democrats nominate 27 electors on their side, so if Democrats win, those electors then vote. Republicans as well, they nominate 27 on their side, and those would vote if Florida were to go Republican. There are some issues though with the system. For instance, California, according to the United States Census Bureau, having a population of almost over 37 million and 55 electors, and Wyoming, which is considered to have one of the smaller populations in America, around 568,000 and 3 electors, actually has more power per person, elector per person, than California, ratio-wise. Another issue that arises is that a presidential election is supposed to span the whole country, but actually it only takes place in few states that actually could go either way. Some states are solidly one party. California generally goes Democratic, so there's no point in a Republican even trying in that state. Same as Texas. But Florida, for instance, can go either way. So most presidents focus on those kind of states called swing states, or battleground states. Florida, Pennsylvania, etc. So I hope that after today, when you go into the ballot box on November 4th and vote for the name of whoever you choose, you realize that you actually aren't voting for that person. You're voting for the 27 or 55 electors that are nominated by that particular party, who in turn will vote for the president come November. I know it sounds so bizarre that we aren't actually voting for the president or determining the president, but whoever said politics is easy to understand. Thank you very much.